Thank you for coming along this evening. It's really nice to see everybody. And I also want to just add to what's just been said. Conor's done a great amount of work setting this up, so thank you very much for that as well. It's also one of my mentees, so I'm having a proud mentor moment as well here now as well. So we've got lots of really great things to talk about from our panel of experts as well. Before we get diving into the pizza as well, I know tummy clocks are probably going to be ringing a little bit. For those of you that don't know me, my name's Steve Keith and I'm the founder and Chief Behavioural Officer at The Branding Man, which is employer brand service which I set up last year after eight fantastic years working at EY, leading on marketing and comms for their apprenticeship programmes. Previous to that, I was a secondary school teacher on the Teach First programme, working out in Essex. So that gives you a little bit of kind of indication as to my experience that I've had along the way working with young people. And I think for me, that's always been the strand that goes through everything that I do. And it really wouldn't surprise me for the majority of us sitting in the room right now, when it comes to digital, some of the first experiences that we might have had might have been through shared computers, PCs, or Macs maybe even in that day. That were used in schools and maybe even at home as well, where connecting to the internet involved plugging into the wall, waiting for a dial tone to happen, anything like me when I was a teenager and trying to maybe illegally download songs, that you were sitting there for half an hour waiting for that to happen rather than it being something that you could literally just access on your phone in a matter of seconds. And I think from that perspective, that experience of digital, for me, one of my first was sitting at a computer in our school library at the age of 14 in year 9 and being asked to complete a computer set of questions that were going to tell me what my destiny was going to be. And at that point, I was told that I was either going to be a florist or a lawyer. Now, obviously, I've taken neither of those careers, largely because if you've seen my attempts to arrange flowers, it's awful. But also as well, from a legal perspective, I'm probably the person at a murder mystery dinner party, for example, that would probably get it wrong every single time. So obviously not the right case in terms of that. But from a career and business perspective, I think my journey into employer branding was one very much where it was a career that didn't exist 20 years ago. And when it came to looking, when we were all teenagers maybe, at the careers that we were going to be looking at, the resources that we had available to us were limited probably to books that were sat on a dusty shelf in a careers library within a school, or what you could find on an Encarta CD-ROM that you were plugging into that PC. Today, that's changed completely. There are so many different ways that young people can access career information. And I think that's the beauty of the world that we live in at the moment, but it's also one of the challenges because what digital has given us is so many different ways to find what we're looking for, but also a platform for everybody who's got an opinion to share it. So there's a lot of noise out there. So what we wanted to do this evening was create an event where we could talk about how you actually cut through that noise and what best practice might look for in terms of digital. So what we're going to do is we've got our panel discussion. As Sam said, we've got Conor, Samantha, Hamish and Clare here. Claire has stepped in at the last minute, but Rowena is sadly having to look after her daughter at home. So sad to see Rowena not here, but Claire is fabulous in terms of the world of digital. We used to work together at EY, so thank you for stepping in. We're going to have about an hour going through the discussion. Some set questions that we've got to discuss, and then also questions from you in the audience as well, before breaking into some more networking with pizza and the Prosecco too. If you do have any questions at any point and you're a little bit shy about asking in front of a room full of people, then we are using Menti. So if you go onto menti.com and you enter that code there, you'll be able to pop your question in there. And when we get to the questions, I'll just have a look and see what's there in terms of questions. Okay, so let's get going. So the first thing I think would be really useful for everybody to know with the panel is a little bit more about who they are and the work that they do. So Conor, can you kick things off?
So obviously I'm Conor. I previously worked not going to uni for 2 years. So for those who don't know, job board in the early career space. I had that side of the table. and then moved over to Springpod about 3 months ago, which is a lot more based around the brand awareness and student engagement with young people. So being able to talk from sort of both sides of the spectrum, that very sort of volume recruitment side, and actually how to engage young people from an earlier age. So that's a bit about me, really.
Hi everybody, I'm Sam and I've worked at Shoosmiths for 9 years this month, maybe this week. And so happy 9 years to me. Shoosmiths is a national law firm. We have 13 locations in the UK and I run our graduate programme. So we take on about 30 trainee solicitors a year and about 50 work experience placements. And we run insight evenings, campus events. So really we do the whole graduate programme, me and one colleague. So right from attraction right through to qualification. So it's a fairly large period of time.
I'm Hamish, I work at Tarmac. I'm the early careers resourcing manager, so looking after the attraction of all of our apprentices, graduates, work experience, interns, placements. We're a new resourcing function essentially, so that brings with it its own challenges, and prior to this I was the only early careers expert at my previous organisation, so kind of used to living in a very general early careers space and having to develop knowledge on the nuances between the different attraction methods and the different kind of methods within the business.
Good evening everyone, I'm Claire, I work for EY. I specifically work within our attraction team, managing our attraction activity from about sort of London South, so covers that kind of region. My role, it's been quite interesting actually to see the differences between Sam and Hamish and myself because our team's quite big, as you can imagine. We have about 1,400, 500 roles that we attract for each year across the apprentice and the graduate space. And within that, we have a branding team as well that then covers all of the attraction from probably year 12, year 13, all the way up. And I have 8 advisors across the UK that will go out and complete a lot of that activity as well.
Great, thank you guys. So I think you'll agree, kind of lots of experience there and lots of different perspectives that are going to be added to the panel this evening. So the first question that I want to open up with you all is, what would you say a best in class, because we're all looking for striving for excellence within the industry, digital strategy might look like? Anybody would like to start the ball rolling?
I think it's got to be comprehensive and it's got to kind of give a real insight into what your organisation looks like. This generation looks for truth and authenticity. If you're not providing a truthful and authentic story, then they're just not going to be engaged. And it's no longer about what job they're going into. They care about the organisation and what that organisation does. So it's no longer just, oh, I'm coming in to do a job or I'm coming in for the benefits. It's, is this organisation ethical? Does it match with my ethics as a person? Does it fit my moral compass? And you've got to give them that information from day one and then build a story into what the job will be and how that's going to benefit their career. So they're interested in the big picture first, so you lead with that and funnel it down to the job once you've got them interested.
I think that's great for the content piece, but also about the reach. So a best in class kind of digital strategy is going to be about reaching the widest amount of people and then them being able to self-select into that process for you. So an example of that would be when we first started using Twitter, we used to post pictures of animals, but I realise that sounds really weird now when I say it out loud. But for example, it might be a picture of a pug with a stack of papers next to them, and we'd be like, "We're screening your applications," so it was a bit of a playful kind of thing. So somebody pointed out to us, you kind of post a lot of puppies and cats and stuff. Do you think maybe you're attracting a few girls because of that, and maybe not guys? We were like, maybe we should be posting pictures of rhinos and lions, but things like that. So I think really being able to think widely about the way that you're putting your digital stuff out there and making sure that it appeals to the kind of broadest range of people so that they can then self-select into what you're the content that you're asking them to look at.
I think a big thing to add as well is you're kind of in a day and age where every single young person's used to everything's instant. In theory, I could go on my phone right now and, you get an answer to something straight away. So having your digital strategy that's actually all about authenticity, like Hamish was saying, and actually instant messaging. So a lot of clients have been using things like WhatsApp and things like this, so that there's that constant authenticity and ways to communicate with the audience more than anything. Because in theory, there's no way if you're an organisation, for a young person to speak to you unless they're at an event, or there's no way to create that kind of initial bond with them. I mean, Sam was saying the other week at the Early Careers Conference, people come up to her and say, oh, we saw you on Facebook and we know a bit about you, and it's that personal bond that you want to create as well with the strategy. So when they turn up from assessment centre, they're not turning around and going, feeling out of place, and then you're getting the best performance from them ultimately as well.
I think it's really interesting that you've all said that, because one of the things that we've changed this year in particular is that authenticity piece. So from the very get-go, it was what can we do to make sure that students know exactly what they're coming into, and that they're aware, but also from the side of retention, so that when they come in, they know what kind of qualification they're doing and what they're going to be doing day to day. And that was particularly important when it comes to, we're talking a lot about digital today, but again around digital apprentices and the tech roles that we have. Because what we found is that yes, we've got this quite big brand and it's great, but when we're trying to attract technology students through, they're not necessarily wanting to know potentially maybe about culture. Some of them do, which is what we're seeing more of a change of now. But if they're going into cyber or they're going into digital, they want to know exactly what they're going to be doing. They want to know what coding language they're going to be using. So instead, it's also, again, that authenticity message, but things like we've introduced job description videos, so that we've got people that relate directly to them when they're looking to attract students, and things just about giving them more details within that brand strategy. So using a lot more kind of blogs and stories from people so that they can relate directly back to the brand and actually the roles that they're applying for.
Okay.
I think the biggest thing is, in terms of attraction and a diversity point of view, is putting stuff out there that people identify with. So if someone's scrolling through Twitter and they see your brand and they see a picture, do they look at that picture and think, yeah, that person looks like me? Because it sounds really horrible to say, but that ultimately is what people look for. Do I look like I would belong in this organisation, or do I look like I wouldn't? And that's something that we're struggling with at the moment, because we're predominantly an ageing workforce of white old men, basically, to put it bluntly, and to really target that babe and that female background is really difficult for us, because we've got pockets of diversity, but again, that sits more in our central functions and in our operational arm. So how do we attract without having the resource to attract that market? So it's a really interesting problem that we're having.
That explains why we got so many applications for pugs as well.
It's interesting as well with the video content that you were saying that you do at EY. We've at Springpod, I know some of you in here know because you actually getting involved with this, is like the Classroom's Boardroom series that we've launched. So basically the Graham Norton show for apprentices is kind of the big play on words. But the fact that it's authentic, like video content, it's a chat show format, it's really, really engaging for a young person. It's very semi-formal, and it's a way, like Harriet was saying, it's a way of basically putting a job ad into a really simple format because kids don't want to scroll through pages and pages of job ads. They want to see something and actually relate to them. Like Hamish was saying, you watch an apprentice and you think, oh, that's like me, I was like that at school. And understanding their background and why they've then gone into that role. And I think that's really important now to create.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, there's some interesting themes that you're picking up on there that I see every day in terms of attraction strategies that employers are using and maybe missing opportunities for. We do live in that society where we're all scrolling and swiping, and so that attention piece becomes really important. So whether it's something where you've got some pugs there that captures their imagination and gets them to stop and then takes them on that journey to take them through kind of the recruitment pipeline. So I always look at that in terms of going from all the way through awareness of your brand, consideration for it, a preference of actually joining that organisation, going through to actually starting the application and joining. And it's interesting what you were saying there, Claire, as well, about that kind of piece around when people actually join as well, and the pieces that you were saying, Hamish, there around authenticity. There was some research about 2 or 3 months ago that suggested that 80% of people that are joining organisations now are not experiencing the experience that they were told they were going to from the marketing and branding that they were seeing when they were looking for jobs. So there's a really important role for us all to play as early career professionals to make sure that what we're saying something is going to be like is actually what happens when people join an organisation. Because from a retention point of view, you obviously want to be able to show that you can hire people and keep them there, But we live in a world as well where, as I was saying, kind of people can share information quite freely. So if somebody's not having a very good experience working for you, they're probably going to be telling somebody about it. Have you experienced kind of any of those pieces around where people might have necessarily not been happy, or they might have kind of suggested that there's something not quite right?
When I was not going to uni, we used to see it quite a lot, because obviously one of our major competitors was things like Rate My Apprenticeship. So a big thing like we used to hear was that there were a lot of apprentices, and I think when you're young, you think you're owed something when you're 16. And what we were hearing a lot was that they were getting sort of really bad feedback because kids were expecting much bigger salaries, and they were kind of expecting they were going to go in and be like a senior hire and things like this, and actually it was causing them to have like a really negative kind of impact when they're recruiting. And like you said, you know, a kid can go on Twitter right now and put like hashtag XYZ employees awful, and it could get trending really, really quickly, and it can go around their school and then it goes to another school, and it really does. And we did see it often catch like wildfire within organisations where kids would have a bad experience.
I think that kind of speaks also to what we expect from Generation Z. So if you look at who they are as an audience and what we're trying to align with our digital strategy as well, in terms of speaking out to that, how do you attract them in a crowded environment? There's the piece around the fact that they are, we call them digital nomads. So they're the first generation that don't know life without a smartphone. So you've got that expectation as well, that if you are saying that you are delivering a digital strategy, that you really understand what the behaviours are of the person that has the smartphone in the hand. They've got that passion around learning and self-teaching as well. They cherish knowledge, because in a way they were the generation as well who saw their parents suffer as part of the recession, so they value job security. That piece around also as well, that's been hinted at, that we can probably maybe unpick a little bit as well, is around the proliferation of on-demand services. We've got Netflix, Uber, Deliveroo. There's kind of an expectation that you can just pick up a phone and get something when you want it. So from an employer's perspective, when you're trying to start a conversation with them, that conversation doesn't necessarily always have to be always on in terms of somebody always behind the screen to answer the question. But there needs to be a strategy in place to support that communication between the candidate and the employer as well. And there's something that I'm going to come to you, Sam, particularly with this as well, just because I know that in the last week or so you've launched your own vlog on YouTube.
I'm going to be a YouTube star.
It's fantastic. If anyone wants to go and look at it, we will send a link round in the communications afterwards. But that role of social media influencers as well, and the role that they play in terms of the buying decisions that candidates might be making when they're looking at their future careers and the aspirations that they've got as well. So do you want to tell us a little bit more about why you set up the channel, for example?
Yeah, so obviously Sir can be a millionaire. We like the Kardashians. But so, you know, like companies that have a product and they want their bag to be seen in the hands of a celebrity, and for that to go onto Instagram, and then that influences other people to go and buy it. That's really simple to understand. But I thought about that, and how can we do that with careers? How can we kind of use influential people who are already on social media and have large followings to impress upon other people that are following them? So we scouted out some people that were specifically blogging or vlogging in the kind of legal education world. There's loads of study blog. I didn't really know about this before. It's study grammars. They just post pictures of their really, really beautiful desks, with pastel highlighters and other, I don't know, succulent. They all love the succulent. And their coffee. And oh my God, they have so many followers on Instagram, but they obviously have that reach. So we tried to kind of plug into a bit of that. And then in the legal space, there's a solicitor who works for a competitor firm, but we don't mind because she's great, in Birmingham, Chrissy Wolfe, and she has a channel called Law and Broader. So she does a lot of careers advice videos on there, like vlog style, and again, really big following. I think she's got about 3,000 subscribers on YouTube. We thought, this is great, and we want to be able to reach into this kind of markets and do some collaboration with these people so that we can reach more people. So that was kind of the starting of the kind of influencer thoughts that we had. I guess we don't really have any products that we can just send we could just send a lawyer, I guess, just to sit like at their desk. That might be the way. And we do have, like, you have branded merchandise and things which you can get out there through competitions and things and retweet those photos. So yeah, that was the start of it. So we started collaborating on different things like videos or kind of like chat show, interview style videos where we would talk to these people and then they would obviously share that out and we would reach their markets. And then in terms of what I've done is I was going out to lots of events similar to this or conferences and talking about digital engagement, and lots of people were asking me questions or saying, you know, we've seen you on LinkedIn and you're doing this and actually really want to know more about it. And so I thought, well, we do a huge amount of careers advice for students, but maybe actually something we're doing quite well is if I could give advice to careers professionals as well. So that's what I've now started sharing a little bit of on my own YouTube channel, which that sounds ridiculous. YouTube channel. Yeah, but yeah, do go and watch it. Like, it's 15 minutes, it won't kill you. Subscribe, please, you know, all of that.
That's the only reason you're here.
I was saying, like, I don't feel like really young enough to be like on, you know, doing videos on YouTube, and but since I posted on there, I thought, oh, you know, obviously look around and see what else is on there. And people do like bedroom tours, and they do like what's in my bag. I was like, I could do a what's in my bag for careers professionals who have to go to lots of law careers fairs, like mints, hand sanitizer, all the other firm merchandise I've collected. Yeah.
Really quick question: how did you go about scouting out those influencers online?
Well,
because that's very difficult to find the right people.
Yeah.
How did you convince them to work with you, and do you don't want money?
No money at all. Yeah. So we were really active as Shoosmiths grads. We were really active on Instagram, particularly. That's my favourite. And we were already kind of chatting and engaging with these people on social media, and we were already perhaps like sharing their videos, or we might like bump into them at a networking event, and we just started to kind of build up, I guess, virtual relationships with them. And then, so it was then quite a natural step to be able to say, look, we're doing a video series, would you like to come into the office, we can film, this is the kind of idea we've got, 40 minutes, blah, blah, blah. And they were really up for it. So one of the other girls that we had on was called Rosie, and she was at the time a future solicitor at another law firm. And she has a upper limb deficiency. And I was really keen to speak to her because I'd seen her talk at a number of other events, specifically about her disability and whether that had helped her, impacted her negatively, and different things. And I thought I really like that this is a topic that people might be interested in that's not really out there, and spoke to her about it, and she came on, so that was great. And then just thinking like about another person that I chat to regularly on Instagram at the moment. Her name's Legally Leanna. They're easy to find for me because you can just type in like law, and they're all like law studies, law, love, legally, blonde, and all of that. So Legally Leanna, and she's also a future solicitor. So these are not people that I'm going to recruit. Well, maybe they might change, might they? But probably not. And she's a future solicitor somewhere else, or future trainee solicitor. And she's built up a bit of a following, all these aesthetically pleasing desks, lots of pictures of her at coffee, in like, probably do a bedroom tour, I don't know. And then she started creating these little postcards. And like one of them, this is one she's released this week, it says, all I want for Christmas is to be a trainee solicitor. And people are buying these postcards from her. Right, I feel like this is, does anybody use Canva?
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure she makes these on Canva, right? So you totally knock this up yourself. But anyway, she's found a little kind of niche, then people are buying into it, and they're buying into her brand on Instagram, and she's sharing a bit of careers advice, and then she's selling these postcards. And I just think, wow, if you can do it, go for it. That is amazing. Anyway, does anybody know what a velvetizer is? It's a hot chocolate.
Like pre-culture.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so you're going to have a lot of products to go and look up after this. It's a hot chocolate machine. It basically, you put the milk in and the hotel chocolate, and it whizzes it up. It's amazing. I've got one. And anyway, she got one. So I was like, we've been having chatting about this hot chocolate machine. And so I think, you've got to invest that bit of time to build those relationships and connections. Like, it's not going to just happen overnight. And she messaged me and said, like, I've done my new Christmas postcard or whatever, can you share this? So we're not affiliated with it, it's not something I'm going to buy, but for me to share that on an Instagram story from Shoosmiths grads and say, look, this is quite a cool little thing, like it's a motivational postcard, that really helps her out, and she'll be more likely to maybe get involved in something that I want to do, or some attraction thing that I might want to do later down the line. So no money involved.
I was going to say, I think it's more of that reciprocal relationship.
Yeah.
So if you think about it as well, you'd be surprised as how many people, I know we work for a very, very big business, but very similar when you were talking about that. We've got a girl that was paralegal and then came on to we have a very small legal part to EY, and she came on and she does vlogs exactly the same as what you've described. And we never knew about it, and then one of our old colleagues told us about it, and we were like, oh, we should really try and like jump on this a little bit. But it's almost that reciprocal point where you're like, well, what can we almost do for you that's quite easy for us to do as an attraction team? And then they might also support in that way.
It is about kind of looking out for people who they want a bit of self-promotion, which you can provide, and you want a bit of promotion that they can provide. And then, the other one I'm going to mention is, I don't know if, is anybody here in the legal space? Okay, she's called Eve Cornwell. She's called. That's her brand. No, that is her name. And she is also just started, I think, at Linklaters, so like one of the massive law firms. And she has got absolutely something insane, like thousands and thousands of YouTube followers. She's got like a YouTube agency. I'm not even sure what a YouTube agency does. And she just like does videos, cool videos about, she definitely does what's in my bag one. I bet she does a bedroom tour one. And I think she's just been vlogging about her studies, about going through the LPC, about getting a training contract with Linklaters, and people have just really bought into it. And now on the back of that, she's launched her own coffee kind of brand, because that's her like USP, is that she loves coffee, and then people know that. So it's insane. She did do a collaboration video with Linklaters, the lawyers that she joined, but it wasn't that good.
Sam, I've been out of this marketplace for about 18 months, and I'm just coming back into it, and I did the global brand for Linklaters. I cannot tell you how much things must have changed in the 18 months, because at the time when we were launching that brand, we could not get them to do anything on social. So what's changed? What's driving that? What you're doing is so different from 18 months ago. How can you do that? You're a law firm. How can you keep your PR department away from you to allow you to do that?
Yeah, so this is a question I come up against a lot, and actually I'm probably in a lucky position, I don't know if this helps, but basically our business development and kind of PR teams and marketing and all that are so focused on clients. They're so focused on building that business and all of that, and they can't really they don't see as much benefit in the careers or employer brand. And so because it's something that I'm passionate about, I feel like I'm happy to make my own time, to do, they've just been happy to let me run with it. And I generally go with if I step over the line, someone will pull me back, but they haven't yet, so.
What about EY?
And I think a lot with this discussion is that sometimes we forget about the talent that we've actually got within the business. So we've spoken a lot, Steve mentioned around the digital nomads and people being brought up as like the first time they've never had life without a phone. And what you're actually thinking about is, well, a lot of these people that are coming through might actually be involved and interested in a lot of this talent, and we're not necessarily utilised them before because of that. So as a brand, we need to be looking at the talent that we're getting involved, that we've already got, that we're not going to pay for, that are happy to be advocates as well. And I think a lot of the change with brand is that because of that, if we are not utilising Instagram and some of the other big platforms and things like that, then we are going to get left behind. So it's about the business buy-in, but also about the return on investment. So a lot of the time, if we're looking at SEO and the email comms and all the big business that we work with to make sure that we're not overloading with students with 5 emails every week and things like that, which the big issue at the moment is around the amount of communications that students get, especially in the apprenticeship market as well, because they might have Springpod, they might have EY, they might have Shoosmiths, literally everyone emailing them all the time, is the case of we need to make it relevant, but also we need to be looking at that measurement. So if it's around click-throughs, if it's around, in our team specifically, we look at the applications that are driven through from conversion. For every single event that we do now, for any big digital campaign, it's all about the applications that are driven through. And if we're not seeing the return on that, we don't do it. So that's been a big change this year, in that the strategy has been a lot more whittled down. So a lot of the big schools fairs, or for example, some of the stuff that we might have done previously, which are big branding exercises, we might not do anymore because we need to see that return on investment and where we're seeing resource. So I think that, from what I've seen around branding and getting investment from the business and being able to prove it to them, that's where the change has been over the past 18 months, I think.
Because I think probably up to now, a lot of people have just asked that question on their application form of where did you hear about us, and it's not reliable. But now there's no reason why you can't track people through the system, check out what the conversion rates are, so you can see, okay, well, Facebook drove 50% of applicants to me, Instagram drove 25%, and, well, no, Twitter drove 25%. Let's say, but actually the ones who were then going through and actually applying, they were all Instagram. And even though Facebook put 50%, or I don't know, next stage or whatever, even though Facebook put 50% through in the beginning, they might not be successful or whatever. So being able to track that, you should be able to do through just Google Analytics, basically at a really basic level. So you might need marketing team input to be able to do that, but that is the return on.
Thinking slightly differently about it as well. So this year what we've taken a slightly more targeted and specific approach. So you mentioned earlier targeting females, targeting B&B students, that's kind of a big target for us this year. And one of the things that we've done is been looking at LinkedIn. Now, previously we've used that for a lot of the experience hire space, but EY have not really used LinkedIn for the student space, and that's because we've never seen a return on it. But we've seen that a lot of the big businesses and our competitors now are reaching out directly to students. And an example, just this morning, I sent 60 messages out to female students to try and attract them through to our Insight programme. And within an hour, I'd had half of those message me back to say that they were interested. And so if we look at the resource that's being put into that through social media and digital, and if we can pick up the phone and just chat to them for 5 minutes, then that's sometimes even more worth it, and we can see the return on that, rather than going to attend a big careers fair with students where they're just saying, yeah, I'll apply, and we can't measure it through totally. So it's about thinking slightly, I think, outside of how we've used it, and that's slightly more difficult for us as well, because we spoke a little bit earlier about that authenticity piece, and things like Snapchat for the market. Unfortunately, they're a client one, what we call a client one, so they're like one of the big clients for us at EY, so we can't use them, which is a real shame, because I think there's a lot of content that we could drive for that. So instead it's about using the different markets and trying to be a bit more clever with that.
I think following on from the brand awareness piece, well, you're at a time where brand authenticity is the kind of big focus as well on that. So the amount of time that young people are spending with your brand and actually engaging with the brand. Because it's funny, you said about, like, obviously everything's ROI driven, I completely agree, but when I did the move from not going to uni to Springpod, I've actually seen a lot more clients focusing more on brand awareness rather than just recruitment. And yes, they want figures in terms of volume, but a lot of clients I worked with not going to uni are actually saying, well, brand authenticity and being able to track the amount of time young people are engaging with us and asking questions, that's becoming a real big priority, I think, in this space now, because they want the quality over the quantity. And, you know, if you say, I'll give you 10 really good quality applicants that engage with you, instead of 200 applicants who probably none of them are even going to be considered, it's that value factor as well, and delivering actually a much better ROI, quite frankly.
What I kind of, an idea I've toyed with is, how do I make Tarmac an influencer? So combining the career space and the influencer space, because we all know the power these influencers have, but how can we as Tarmac get up to that stage and shout about the stuff that we do and help support things like Extinction Rebellion, and how can we provide careers advice to these individuals? Because the early career space isn't just about how can I get the best talent, because the best talent for me isn't the best talent for Shoosmiths or for EY. It's about how can we work within this space to bridge the employment gap and the skills gap. We shout about it every day, and the government is going to take a long time to do anything because they're so focused on Brexit. So actually, it's time for us to start taking matters into our own hands. And just because a candidate isn't right for me, doesn't mean that I can't still give them advice to make them a more employable student or more employable individual for the future. And that might seem like it's going to take more time out of the day and going to be more effort for you. But actually, if they come back and join you in 5 years' time as a skilled hire and come through a direct channel rather than through an agency then all of a sudden you've cut down the recruitment costs in the long term as well. So it's about being really clever with your branding, with your digital attraction. How can you attract now for the long term as well as just for your next cycle of intakes?
And I think that's potentially the flip side of things, because I'm talking quite generally here about kind of we recruit for grads and apprentices, but actually with Springpod and a lot of the apprentice side of things, you know that with an apprentice you might have to come into contact with them 4 or 5 times before they're even going to know your brand. Okay, so our get it all the time, and Harriet will laugh because she works in our coaching and curricula team within the apprenticeships, and our tagline is building a better working world. So all the time we get, so you're a construction company, like constantly, and when you go to a fair it will do your head in, because then you have to go and explain about audit and all these different things and the opportunities, but in actual fact we know that okay, well with our brand it might be very different. So we're talking about this ROI, and it's kind of a catch-22, because everything's got to be measured, and that's how we justify it to the business and everything like that. But then in the schools market, we know that we've got to reach different influencers, and I'm sure we can talk about that a little bit later on, but we know that we've got to come into contact with them at different points, at different activities, so going into their schools, speaking to them digitally, using things like PathMotion and other companies to be able to give them direct access, and Springpod and all these different things to make sure that they are getting those contact points before they apply. So I think there's that element. Yes, we've spoken a lot about branding and how to get the ROI, but at the end of the day we do have to link back to what you've been saying.
Yeah. It's also the age as well. You're also seeing a lot more employers starting to engage young people much earlier down the line. I think you used to sort of 16 plus, when they're in year 11 you were seeing a lot of engagement, but now a lot of employers are actually targeting young people much earlier and actually building a long-term pipeline, because you're 13, 14-year-olds, you want to, like you said, you're kind of coaching them and building the better world long term as well, and educating them on what does EY do, because most I imagine most 13-year-olds will be like, I have no idea. So it's like,
don't care.
it's that education factor as well, long term, and making sure that pipeline is looking healthy for 5 years as well, and not just 1 year.
Yeah, I think from what you've all been saying, there's a few things to kind of pick up on there, because there is a gap to fill. There's schools are being asked to deliver careers advice and guidance with their careers leaders that are now in place. That's a positive step. So there's an easy way to get in touch, or an easier way, I will say. It's not always easy to build a relationship with a school. To know who you should be speaking to, and they're being measured against Gatsby benchmarks. So you've got 8 measures that you know that you can kind of be speaking to. If you look at that intelligently, you can build that into your strategy and know that when you go knocking on a door to reach out to a school, or when you're looking at your digital strategy, what role is that going to play? And I think there is a piece in terms of return on investment and the landscape that's experienced within schools of educating your stakeholders internally as well, so that when they might question that return on investment, you've got an answer as to why that's part of your strategy. And particularly with the role of influencers, it was something that I worked on at EY as well, was there's a micro and a macro influencer market as well. So are you going to go for reach, which has been mentioned right at the top of the panel in terms of what you're trying to achieve? Do you go for somebody that's got millions of followers and hope that somebody might latch onto what you're saying? Or do you go for a micro influencer who's only got 1,000 or 2,000 people, but everybody that's engaging with that person is having conversations with them, like Sam's saying, and building relationships? There's a piece with branding around that piece of, as you hinted at, Claire, kind of like the number of times that you have to see something before you will actually buy it. And it's completely the same when somebody's applying for a job. There are very few people, I would argue today, that see a job advert and apply for it straight away. They will go and do their due diligence and do their research and look at the website, the social channels, and if you're not present on a particular platform, question why you're not present on that platform. But there's also an argument with maybe platforms like Snapchat. So I know it's something that I considered for a number of years as part of the strategy that we were rolling out at EY was, should we be on that platform? Is it the right space? How do we actually, if we're going to be on the platform, how do we do that authentically? And if you're looking at authenticity as well, LinkedIn, for example, great place to go fishing for candidates. But are there people in your business that are active on LinkedIn? that are already sharing content or using tools within the platform like article writing and publishing and things like that to be able to start to build their own personal brand. I mean, do you have any superstars within your business maybe that are already doing that are doing the work for you? Because that's kind of a quick win.
We've got quite a few in Tarmac. We've got a platform called Smart that is used. Yeah, a lot of people use it, but we have like a leaderboard on that as to like who's most effective. And one of my colleagues is actually winning by an absolute clear margin. But that's a really cool way because we do some really cool stuff at Tarmac. Like we do a lot of archaeological digs before our sites go live. We do a lot of sustainability work. We do loads of community engagement with small villages that wouldn't normally get targeted. So actually we did some really great work, and it's a really great opportunity for us to actually shout about the work that we do, which we don't do often. We don't do it in big glossy PR presses. We just slide it into the back of our sustainability report and publish that every year quite quietly and just run with it. So it's a really good opportunity for us to get some of the wider things that we do out there, as well as collaboration and all the rest of it that we do on a day-to-day business.
What is that? What is that called?
Smart. It's SMART.
Yeah. It's quite good as well to, we adopted it, I think David, we in our part of the business probably about 18 months ago now. And it is good because it gets a lot of competition going within the team. So like you mentioned, the leaderboard, and we'd offer prizes for the people who have shared the most, and then they can also propose their own content. So that's one of the biggest things, is that we can have our own corporate content that we roll out, but actually a lot of the time if we can get some authentic content from people already in the business, then that's even better, and then we can tailor it and make sure it then fits in with the brand, and then they get rewarded for it as well. So it is quite a good tool, that one, to be able to use, yeah.
It's about how do you as a business maintain some control over what people are saying, because obviously you don't want someone to accidentally say something that they shouldn't say on social media, but also provide that authentic story. And there are tools out there, and who does that sit with? That doesn't sit with us as the early careers profession, because actually we've got a million and one other things to focus on. That sits more with the comms side of things, but we need to sit close enough to comms to be able to use them, but far enough away that they're not constantly going to be watching what you're doing. Because if you're doing like Sam's doing and being an influencer, actually there's going to be stuff on there that if you ran it past the comms team, they'd probably say you can't put that out because it doesn't fit with X, Y and Z. Actually sometimes you've got to go a bit off piece and a bit off your traditional brand, because comms and marketing look after that sales brand and look after the brand as a whole. They don't look after your employer brand. And I think that's the key distinction to make. Your employer brand is very different to your brand that you go and sell to clients with. So it's about keeping those two things separate but similar.
No, I completely agree. I think that speaks to what you were saying about how you've grown that presence, Sam, and your question, Jane, around kind of how you have managed to kind of engage with the business and get them to take risks. A lot of the work that I've done in the past has involved you having to kind of just ask for forgiveness rather than permission, and just go for it and try it, because once they see the results, most of the time they'll go, oh yeah, try that, okay. Or from a social point of view, simple things like being able to have plans in place that mitigate risk. So if people feel confident that there's been given a list, a thorough briefing or list of do's and don'ts when you're on social, people will have a go at doing it because they don't feel nervous about sharing something and then being told off later on.
Yeah, you definitely can't just let people have free reign of things without being able to give some guidance. But just wanted to say about the kind of risk around what you're doing on social media and it being out there, and also getting that kind of approval from the marketing team. So we do Facebook Live videos, which is a bit of a risk. You know, what if a guest on Facebook Live said something, or what if a trainee was having a bad day and said something wrong on there? You know, once it's out, yeah, you can delete the video afterwards, but it's out really, isn't it? And but really, and that was like my idea. It was born out of Deliciously Ella, I don't know if anyone likes that. So she used to do these YouTube videos. They were a couple of minutes long. She'd just sit on a sofa with her dog. There's a theme going on here. And she would, like, people would have emailed or tweeted her questions or whatever, and she would literally just answer them. She'd be like, oh, Sam asked me a question, how do I make almond butter or whatever, and then she'd like tell you. And it was a really relaxed format, and that's what I looked at and thought, this is a really nice, relaxed way of being able to share some information, and that's what we can do at Shoosmiths, to deliver information in a really consumable, easy to watch way. And I couldn't quite work out how I would do that. And I went off on maternity leave, and then when I came back, I was like, I've got it. I've had the brainwave I needed. I'm going to do Facebook Live videos. And the business was a little bit like, not really sure. Nothing's really been happening on social media since you've been off for a year. But I think they were enough, like, I had a business case and everything, it was well thought out. There was a whole plan behind it, and it went forward. So we've been doing that for about 18 months now. And the reach, it's gone out, about 80,000 plus minutes of footage has been watched since we started doing it. That's on Facebook alone, so not on YouTube. And then my HR director, who really supported me, I can see the kind of branding that we're doing for the firm, not just for our career space, in an email exchange with our CEO, just said, you should probably talk to Sam about being on Facebook Live. And he replied and said, yeah, sure. I don't know if he knew what he was signing up for. I'm not sure, but I thought, I better get this booked in immediately. So I did, and he came and we did a Facebook Live. We made it a little bit more polished than some of the ones that we filmed on phones. And it was fantastic. And the best bit about it was that he trusted me enough to get in front of the camera with me live. And also, he said, I did not script it at all. I gave him, this is kind of some of the questions that I'm going to go through. I really didn't go through much with him at all, but he said all the stuff you wanted them to say about the brand, about diversity, about what our kind of belief system is in our values, and it was great. And when else does a candidate get the opportunity to kind of be in front of the CEO or kind of learn that information direct from the CEO? So that was a really special moment for me that showed that the business had the trust. Well, I've got our chairman lined up now for the new year. So we're going to keep getting them in now.
Have any of you had an experience, I know I certainly have in the past, where you've engaged senior people within your organisation and put them in front of candidates and then wished that you hadn't?
Yeah. I had the foresight to not put them in front of the candidates, but I had them as part of an assessment day. So in my old organisation, we had the head of the area that the graduates were going into to open the day and close it as a nice touch. And we had two heads of software, one of consultancy and one of managed services. The one of consultancy is a textbook IT geek. You look at him and you just go, you're an absolute IT nerd. Not great with people, not great in front of people, really quiet. And then you've got the managed service director who's really personable, really good in front of people. And so I kind of had to actively choose to go with the director of managed services rather than the director of consultancy, because I would have shot myself in the foot and I probably would have put half the candidates to sleep and just disengaged them completely from the process. So sometimes it's about making those strategic decisions. You might want someone senior, but are they the right person to keep your candidate engaged? And they're not always the right person to keep your candidate engaged.
We had at NGTU, we had one client who, it was like the MD of a small company, and he put out that he wanted an intern to come in the business. And then we kept getting these phone calls from candidates going, I don't want to work there, I'm really sorry that I applied. And we were like, what's going on? So most young people were starting their emails with hello sir and things like this. Because they were saying hello, he was then sending them a 4-page essay saying how he should address people that he'd never want them to work for his firm. And we had this for about 5 different candidates ring us up saying, I've been abused by this MD and things like that. So we had to void his contract. But you do kind of sit there and you're like, these are 16, 17-year-old kids, you've got to give them that bit of leeway. He said, hello sir, it's okay. It's not that bad. And we were literally on the phone and he was like, no, that's really, really bad. Why? It's a fine. And it is funny, sometimes the more dated senior members of teams sometimes actually have such a negative impact on especially in the early career space, because they don't necessarily understand how to speak to young people, and that you do have to give them that bit of leeway and actually educate them, not kind of say we don't want you working from our firm.
think there's a big piece around briefing and things like that when it comes to the brand. So actually getting the buy-in if they understand what we're going to market with. And we've had quite a lot of change over the past 18 months with regards to our recruitment process, and a big piece of that is that we've changed the assessment centres, and students now come into a big EY experience day, all branded very nicely. There's about 100 students on each one of these days, and the day kicks off with a big session and talk from a very senior partner. And that is the start of the day, that everyone gets that first impression of the business, because actually the rest of the process is digital. So it's the first real point where they come into contact with someone from EY. So there's been a big emphasis this year around who we're briefing, what kind of partner we're getting through, especially alluding to your point earlier around getting females and BAME partners out there as well, so that students can relate. But also, especially in that apprenticeship space, is that they're probably really nervous and they don't really know what to do. So someone who has that kind of approach which puts them at ease, and it means it's friendly, and that doesn't come, I guess, easily to many people, but there will be some who will do that very, very well. So it's trying to identify that, and that's, I think, a challenge that we have at the moment around briefing them and trying to find the right people that represent our brand as well at that senior level.
It's the first time as well a lot of young people have ever applied for a job, written a CV, the assessment days. I remember at the early careers conference they were talking about the IBM process where they like send half of them away during the day, and it's so daunting. So I think you've got to educate people. It's the first time that they've done this. You do sometimes have to hold their hand a bit and walk them through the process within reason, and actually understand and get on their level in many ways.
I think part of that briefing process can be around the content that you're pushing out in terms of social media, because then your own employees are on your platforms watching what you're doing, what you're sharing, the messages that you're putting out about the career stuff, and they're then it's easy for them to replicate that information when you need them to.
Yeah. And if we look at the digital tools available to us, what we've done this year as well is we've implemented, more so than previous years, a lot of webinars within the process. So we've spoken a lot today about kind of branding at the very initial attraction point of view, but it's also about that brand as they come through the process and that conversion element. So in particular, like you've mentioned, around getting people from the business to attend webinars just over Skype or whatever software it is, but then to have that authenticity, to tell them what they're going to expect on the day, and then so that they're just a bit more comfortable and they've had, again, more touching points with us within their recruitment process.
Yeah, and I think with webinars Claire, as well, that they are a really useful tool if you haven't already used them as a way of engaging. I've done some work in the last 6 months with Police Now. We use webinars with them in terms of engaging candidates at the application stage and educating them on what the process was going to involve, hints and tips of how they could succeed, and then opening up to a Q&A at the end. And we had about 200 questions that came from the people that were on the other end of the webinar live at the time. Now, that was fantastic. You can't answer all of those questions in that particular time. You've got to be very reactive and have people that can think on their feet and pick up particular question themes that might be coming through. But there's a piece around there in terms of that how do you attract people in a crowded market and knowing what to say. What we actually were able to do then was walk away from that webinar with the list of questions and build a content strategy around the questions that candidates were actually asking rather than what we wanted to tell them. So that you filter and you make sure that you're giving the right message on the right platform at the right time and building those relationships with candidates. So it was a really powerful tool to be able to do that as well. And the great thing about webinars as well is that you don't have it taps into that on-demand live connection with somebody, but you can send the recording around the mailing list afterwards and people can watch it at their leisure. So they don't necessarily have to always be on there, because let's face it, like, you can say that something happens at a particular time, but not everybody is going to be able to make that particular time. So it's a really good way of being able to build that relationship. In that respect, is there, talking to some of the things you've been saying, is there an argument for times in the candidate experience when digital is not appropriate?
Absolutely. It's so different interacting with people online compared to interacting with people in person. And I think in all of this, we're talking so much about the candidate, but actually, what about the parents? The parents in early careers are such big stakeholders, but they still want to meet someone in person, have those discussions with people, see what their child's going to be doing, see how you're going to be looking after their child. Because at that age of 16 to 21, 22, 23, they're still their baby. And this is still their first foray into the world of full-time work for most people. So parents are still incredibly protective and want the best for their children, despite not being quite so involved. Actually, to involve them in the process will help sway you as an employer of choice. So something that I'm looking into is get to know Tarmac events with a panel of graduates, apprentices, and a panel host, like senior person within the business, inviting parents and candidates down and just basically letting them talk, whether it's the good, the bad, the ugly, whatever it is, just being very honest and hearing it from the people who have been there, done that and done the job. And actually then give parents a safe space to go up and engage with these candidates and engage with people that have done it and say, my child's worried about this, or I'm worried about this for my child. And you can put their mind to ease all of a sudden, and candidates will value it as well, because they'll get to know you, get to feel the brand before they even step into your office. And it's a good time to drive that IMD initiative of having a diverse panel up there and having a panel that looks like them, so they can at least identify to one person in that group. So they might not see it in your comms quite as much, they might not hear it in the content, but seeing someone and meeting someone that is like them will do wonders for your attraction.
I think it's really important to retain the personal touch throughout. So digital is fantastic at having that wider reach. It's can be cost effective, like when you're right at the beginning of the process and you're attracting people in, but then as you funnel down and your kind of group gets smaller, being able to meet people in person is important. So we've pulled back on campus events, and I think that's what you were saying as well, because we would go to a campus event and we'd have our mailing list on our iPad, and then we'd come away and we'd have like 25 people signed up to it, and we'd spent 3.5 hours there, 4 hours of my time, 2 trainees' time, maybe a senior person's time, all the promotional materials that we'd given out, the couriers, costs to go there, the cost of the actual attendance, and it was just getting a bit insane for, there's a part of that's a brand awareness and that's important to be represented at certain universities, but I couldn't show the value of it in the same way that I could using digital. So I think there is still an importance of being able to have a presence in person, but we're trying to do that, I guess, in the smaller funnel parts now, and then they're having more touch, like digital touches throughout before they get to that person. And then even looking, so after offer, so just something that we do which is, I think, a really nice personal touch, and just a different way of doing things that's outside of digital, because we do love digital, and I think all of our kind of followers know that, and people that come into our grad scheme. But so we make the offer, they get their paperwork like you'd expect, you do the phone call, all of that stuff, that's great. And then we go out to our interviewing partners and we ask them, why did you give this person the job? What was special? Tell me something personal that you spoke about at the interview. So I don't know, maybe that the candidate had some crazy tractor experience in New Zealand on their gap year or something that came up in the interview. They might mention that, and then we handwrite it in a congratulations card. And this year we had them designed by an ex-trainee who is now doing like beautiful calligraphy designs and things. So that was really nice. It was like a full circle of what we were like trying to keep it into a local kind of important, I think, to like not just go to big brands all the time when you're looking to do like this personal touch. Anyway, so it was handwritten and beautifully designed for Shoosmiths, but with calligraphy, and then they went off. And it's just something really tiny. It took a really small amount of time. It's something really personal that then hopefully means something big to them in the bigger scheme of things. And then, it's a bonus if they post a picture on social media and we can share that. That's great.
I think we have to bring it back to the overall employer brand and the audience that we are reaching out to. And you mentioned influencers already, but when we're looking at face-to-face digital, we can reach a lot. But the way in which we are reaching those students, which are our key audience for apprentices, it's going to be so different to the way in which we are reaching their parents and the teachers. It's not going to work in the same way. And when we look at our resource, how do we then as a branding team go out and try and tackle every single audience? It's really, really difficult. So sometimes that face-to-face interaction can then tick that box, because what you could do is exactly what you said, Hamish, is around we run a lot of insight evenings for schools, and at that point we will then reach out to teachers and the networks that we have to say, well, no, you come along as well, and you bring along 12 of your talent-spotted students to come along, and they can also bring their parents. And we've had, 3-year-old kids there as well because they can't get childcare. But it doesn't matter, because at the end of the day, they're the influencers, and that face-to-face element, we might not have been able to reach them through digital. So unless we were going to maybe pump a bit more investment into it, which we have done in previous years and it's worked really well, but then you almost need that kind of substitution or that extra support there to try and reach that market. And Steve will kind of blow your own trumpet around the parental campaign at EY and everything like that, and it went down really, really well. But as a piece of work that we've done, but then it's how do you continue that momentum, and how are you keep? Yes, we've got this amazing content online. We can refer back to it. It really relates to parents. It relates to teachers. But then it's like, well, actually, what's the content that we are providing after that? How are we supporting the parents to help the students make those decisions?
I think there's an interesting point as well, that a lot of employers are kind of investing the money that they were spending on events and face-to-face in more sort of video and things like that, because you do, as I mentioned earlier, you do get a lot of people, they almost get to know Sam through her video content as if they've met her face-to-face, and I think a lot of employers are investing that money because it's you can track the ROI better than an event, because you're driving applications, you're driving engagement and things like this. But also it's on demand, it's binge-worthy, it's content that's accessible constantly instead of a one-off event. And I think it is interesting how actually there is almost a shift in some face-to-face interactions, and investing in how can you turn them digital and make them on demand.
And I think it's about being smart about the way that you organise events as well, and think about the content. And that's something that we were thinking about for the event this evening as well. Like, how do you, if we're capturing film, how do you then use that to be able to take the conversation back online for something that is in real life this evening, for example, so that you're serving both audiences and making the most of your budget. To speak back to the piece around the parent campaign that I ran at EY, for example, it was an annual campaign. It was a hefty piece of budget, I'm not going to lie. It was a good investment for that year, but there is that piece of once you start a conversation, you've got to be able to carry it on, particularly with parents and teachers as well, because you lay an expectation when we speak so much to the young people, and then we suddenly go, oh, shouldn't we be speaking to that group as well? That you then have 3 audiences that you've got to be able to speak to, and from a digital perspective, you should really be thinking they're a different age group, different attitudes, different behaviours, different knowledge that they want. How are we going to change and switch that strategy up? So it's a really big, meaty piece of work, which is enjoyable but can be quite stressful at times as well. I'm mindful of time, especially because I can see the Franco Manca pizzas in the background there as well. Is there any questions to come from the audience? I mean, we can obviously ask questions to the panel during the networking whilst we're eating, but...
Yeah, we've talked about how to attract young talent and talent in general, but I was at an employer event last night with Universum, and they said that 53% of people when they first join are actually thinking of leaving within the first year. So that's mad, So what are you guys doing as well as attracting to try and retain people? Did you have any kind of
For us, it's career development. So we're really lucky. We sit in the construction trade. We've used apprenticeships for ages. We've built our own talent, and we've grown our own talent. Like, our biggest success story is our current CEO. He started off as a hire apprentice in our business and has grown to CEO of the organisation. We've got success stories like that show that there are opportunities within, and that's what they want. It's not just opportunities to go vertical. Kids nowadays no longer want to go vertical. They want to go sideways. They want to move from operations to marketing, marketing to HR, HR to finance. They want those moves, and then those moves sometimes have to look diagonal. So you've got to start looking for transferable skills. You're no longer looking for a role fit. You're looking for someone who has the fundamental transferable skills to do the job. So yeah, they might sit in operations, but actually if they've got the inkling and they've got the skills to go and do marketing and they're showing a bit of that on the side, put them in a marketing role. They might be happier. It's about engaging a workforce a lot more and actually understanding what they're doing inside and outside of work and what their passions are. Because if you put people in a job that they're passionate about, they're never going to leave it, because they're going to enjoy it and they're going to want to do it. And so many people nowadays have a little hustle on the side that do this for the fun of it, because that's their passion, that's their joy. Their day job isn't their passion. Yeah, become a YouTuber like that. So it's like, go and follow your passion a little bit and add some excitement back into the workforce, because it's so easy to get bogged down in the stress of work and not enjoying it. But if you do something you enjoy, you're set, you're going to keep them and keep it interesting. That's the other thing.
I was just going to say, you've got to create the culture where they're happy to say that, though, haven't you? And if your business and the teams have got a culture where somebody feels comfortable to put their hand up and say, actually, I'm not enjoying finance as much as I thought, but I can see them doing something really interesting over there. I want to have a go at that. You've got to be in a really comfortable place with yourself and your team to be able to say that, I think. So looking at the bigger picture of the culture of the business is important.
Can I say one controversial thing? It's been really interesting to see how things have changed since the last time I was in this market. But I think one thing that hasn't been mentioned tonight is about how complex a student is. And I think it's really easy because we've got very challenging jobs, because we have so many different stakeholders to keep happy in our jobs. So we've got our CEOs who came up from the ranks, so I know what it's like, so we've always done it this way, so we need to keep doing it this way, through to parents, through to the students themselves. But students themselves as one single person, they're not, they aren't a homogenous group. There's so much diversity within that audience, and I've got a question really, it's more of a statement, which is how many people who are employers in the room have targeted digital student strategies? Because I don't see it. I see brilliant digital strategies and amazing approaches to thinking outside of the box in terms of how to get hold of students online. But actually, do we really understand the people that we're trying to get to online? Because the consumer world absolutely do, and they do it brilliantly. And that translation into the employer world is difficult because we've got really tight budgets. And until we can convince people to increase our budgets, then it makes our jobs really difficult. But segmentation of our audience is absolutely critical for me.
There's a big piece as well, because in theory, I was talking to a client the other day and they were saying that they're actually in competition with like Boohoo, because they're trying to capture the same young person's attention at the same time. You go on Instagram, and if I saw a paid ad for Deloitte, I'll probably also see a paid ad for Boohoo Man. So you're trying to capture that attention, and let's be honest, in a way you're kind of spot on, because most young people will go for the Boohoo Man ad, because they're like, oh, I actually need a new pair of jeans, I don't know who Deloitte are. So you do need to, but then I think this is where it relates back to that point of actually educating young people though. And you do, I know it's not precise, but you do have to educate young people on the whole, and constantly that brand authenticity, and get the young people spending as much time with that brand as possible where you can.
You might also see a targeted ad for the Tory party.
You do, yeah.
It comes back to the point that, and I think we've all kind of alluded to this, but the cyclical nature of the early career space is fundamentally broken. If you're still putting your adverts live in October and shutting them in December, you are shutting out a huge majority of the market. And not just from I'm not capturing these people, but also from a neurodiversity point of view. I know that when I was looking for graduate roles, I wasn't applying until January. Ask me pre-Christmas, I would not have cared. But it's about how do you target those people at the right time for them. You can still stick with your September intake and batch intake them, that's not a problem. The problem is everyone thinking, I've got to have my roles out in October, I've got to close them in December, that's the end all. The last campaign I ran from our last intake, I started mid-December, closed end of February, and I still had 2,500 applicants for 22 roles in an IT company that wasn't well known. It wasn't at Google or Facebook, it worked in public sector, not glamorous, not sexy, but we still got a huge number of applicants despite missing the traditional window. And if that's not a testament to how they're behaving and how students are starting to change the way they're thinking, then I don't know what is.
They're always on, aren't
they?
In theory, they're always going to be, they're spending like 2-3 hours a day on average on like social media, and so they're always on. So if you're just shutting them out at specific times, then you're not making the most of the fact that they are an always-on audience.
And I think the other key thing is, just because you've made an offer to someone and they've accepted and they've signed paperwork, you can't guarantee that they will stay yours until the day they rock up on day one at your organisation, because they might get a targeted campaign from someone else that says we can offer you more money, we can offer you better benefits, we can offer you X, Y and Z instead, and they're like, actually that sounds more like me. We know how easy these loyalties are to sway in this audience, so actually until they've started they're not guaranteed candidates. So there's a lot of post-offer care you've got to do to keep them engaged, to keep them motivated and keep them excited about the opportunity that you're giving them.
It's the way in which we work there as well. Sorry to interrupt. I think when we look at our targets as a business, what are we driven by? When we look at what's coming down from senior leadership and we're saying, yeah, on top of that, on top of the cyclical nature, right, they want to see more females, they want to see more black students, and okay, maybe they also want to see STEM. Okay? So if we're always focusing and segregating based on those targets, then that's what's going to drive your brand. That's what's going to drive all of the targets, all the attraction activity. Obviously, that's what's going to happen. So until that movement changes a little bit, where we are being more personal, like brands potentially like Boohoo that are using branding slightly different in the consumer market, then we're not there yet, and I don't have an answer for it, because it's almost like we have to meet the targets that are being set with regards to students coming through and everything like that, and going out and creating brand awareness to those particular groups. So it's almost a bit like a catch-22 with it, because you've got that cyclical piece and you've got the targets that are driven from the business.
Yeah, absolutely. I think like there's a nice kind of piece to wrap up kind of this, because I think we could probably carry on talking about this all evening as well. But we're hinting at maybe a topic for a future Pizza and Prosecco evening around the D&I piece, I think, because I think if I'm interpreting kind of what you're saying, Claire, and what you're maybe hinting at, Jen, as well, around D&I, kind of segmentation as well can be quite dangerous as well, because Gen Z don't see D&I in the same way that we do. They're very suspicious if you start talking to a particular group of people. And I remember back at the ISE conference in the summer making a comment in a session around how actually when we speak so much to a particular type of person in a classroom, if we're in real life situation, you switch off the other people. So if we spend too much time, for example, talking to the girls, the boys are going to switch off. And they're not going to be kind of considering us as employers as well. And it can become really kind of piecemeal and tokenistic in terms of the strategies that we build as well, which speaks very much to the inclusion piece around digital. One of the things that digital does do is allow everybody to take part in the conversation, which I think is really important. Okay, so thank you very much to our panel. Give them a round of applause. And there is pizza. Go and help yourselves.
Thanks to Steve as well. Thank you, Steve.